Hey guys, Spiritual Everything on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. So lots of people talking about fees. Let's take a look. Let's take a dive of some kind for the people who don't know what's going on, for the people who are uninformed or ill-informed and want to be informed. So let's use a train analogy. Most of us in the United States don't ride trains for the most part, but most of the rest of the world rides trains. Now, if you're in a city like me, I'm in DC. I ride trains all the time. If you're in New York, obviously, or San Francisco, you're riding trains. So let's talk about trains. And we'll bring it back to transactions, but just bear with me. So this is the metro. This is DC. In the background, you can see the Capitol building or whatever. The Red Line. I frequent the Red Line myself as someone who lives near it. And, the train comes every so often and has a schedule. We'll say the schedule is 10 minutes. In our example, this train comes every 10 minutes. And, sometimes the train is empty, which is great for me. I like to spread out. I like to man spread all over those seats, you know what I mean? But sometimes the train station is really full. And when it's really full, it's usually during rush hour, or there's a march of some kind going on, or there's tourists there for some reason. And when that happens, obviously it takes longer to get in the train, get out of the train. There's more going on around the station. Sometimes you have to wait for the next train because your train is full. Sometimes you can't even get to the train. And let's say for this example too that instead of a flat fee for riding the train, in this train you can actually pay more to guarantee being in the car that's at the station or the car that's coming to the station. So that means that you can have priority based on what you pay. And another thing to consider here is, especially when it's busy at the station, if I've got a lot of stuff that I'm carrying with me, if I've got packages and boxes, I take up more room on that train. And when I take up more room on that train, it means less people can get in the train with me. It also means I have to sort of fight for that space to get in the train. There's a physical real estate there that, your body takes up X amount of space, but your body plus other stuff that you have, like a backpack, all these people have backpacks for the most part, or bags, that takes up a little bit more space. It's not zero, but it's not really huge, right? Unless you have a lot of boxes, a lot of stuff, you're probably not going to ride the train anyway. You're probably going to take an Uber or a Lyft or some other method of transportation, especially during times when it's busy. You're just not going to bother because it's not worth it. It's not worth the hassle. It's not worth fighting with people. That's my packages, yeah. So let's bring it back to the network. So the riding fee for the train is the transaction fee. The train itself is a block in the blockchain. And I'll get more into how this varies in a second. Train capacity, so how full the train is block size. If the train is max capacity, that means that the transactions are hitting the block size limit, which was and is the case for Bitcoin previously and currently to some degree. I'll get into that in a second. Train station itself, the mempool. So when we talk about mempool and unconfirmed transactions, we're looking at all these transactions waiting to get in the train, right? We're looking at all these people queued up. For you UK people, they're in the queue, right? Some of them have paid a lot to get in the next train. Some of them don't really care if they're in the next train, as long as they're getting there eventually. These are people who have nowhere to be, right? We've all seen them. They're just sort of chilling on the side. They don't care if they're in the next train. They can wait for like the third train or the sixth train. They can pay a little less because they're not in a rush. They don't have somewhere to be. They don't have a job, okay? And I'll get back to that in a second. So the train schedule itself is the block time. When I'm talking about 10 minutes, the blocks clear every 10 minutes, and those confirm the transactions. Those send the people on their way on the train every 10 minutes. What influences block time is hash rate and difficulty. So as people use miners, as hash rate increases, either with GPU mining, CPU mining, or currently is the case ASIC mining, application-specific integrated circuits, hash rate goes up and up and up, which means the electricity for the trains, if you will, is increasing. But the train conductor is always, which is the protocol, is always trying to readjust that train schedule to 10 minutes. Sometimes you don't want to leave people behind who already paid. This is bad. This is where the analogy breaks down. But the 10-minute thing is mainly for security purposes. At least that's how it was proposed in the white paper, and why there's block times at all for anything. Litecoin, for example, has a 2.5 minute block time, which is a fourth of Bitcoin. I'm not going to discuss the issues with that in this video, but there are some security issues that people have discussed. There's a reason 10 minutes was chosen, even though it seems a little arbitrary. And then like I was saying with the train transfer, the packages, if you have a lot of stuff, you're going to take off more space in the train. And in the blocks themselves, what this represents is transactions with multiple inputs or outputs. If you've never received a lot of transactions from somebody, or a donation address is something that comes to mind because it affected me personally. If you've got a donation address, you're getting a lot of random microtransactions. Okay, could be $1, could be $10, could be $100, whatever it is. You're getting all these transactions into one address. When you send that out again to a single address or multiple, it costs more because there are all those inputs in that address. I'm not going to explain it in this video, but it's just something to consider. If there's extra, use the term, computing power to figure out where those transactions are going, it's going to take up more real estate in the blocks themselves. So let's just compare a few coins real quick just to help solidify this a little bit on the network side. If we're talking about Bitcoin, it's 10-minute block times, 1 megabyte blocks with SegWit. What SegWit does is allow for transactions to take exactly half of the space that they currently had. So in this case, if you're a person riding the train, you're now half the person you used to be, which means the train itself can have more half people or full people who don't use SegWit. And the train can fill up with both full people and half people, and in the end, more transactions can happen, in each train, in each block. Bitcoin Cash is 10-minute block time, quote unquote. That's been variable, and 8-minute blocks. Bitcoin Cash is sort of the political response to the inability of the community to come to a consensus on scaling on-chain versus off-chain. I'm not going to get into that in this video. Like I said, with Litecoin, 2.5-minute block time, 1 megabyte blocks. They also have SegWit. They are also moving towards off-chain Lightning type transactions. And then there's Ethereum, which I'm not going to get into because it's beyond and above what I can even understand. But they have a dynamic block size that uses like gas, basically, like a gas station. I'm not going to explain that here. So what influences fees? Priority matters. So like I said, if you want to get on the next block, if your transaction is super hyper critical and you need to make sure that it gets to where it needs to go, and you're on that train, you got work in 10 minutes. The train's coming. We got to go. You send that transaction with a higher fee. If you don't care, if you're just moving stuff around, inventory management, if you will, you don't care if it gets there in 6 blocks or 60 blocks, but it'll get there eventually. You're not going to spend it. If you're holding, it doesn't matter. If I'm moving stuff around in wallets, I don't care. I can use a super low fee and not be concerned as long as it gets there eventually. So I'm not really worried. Why pay a high fee if you're not going to use it? You know what I mean? So if the block is full, you need to pay more to get priority in the next block. Like I was saying in that train example, if you want to get on the next train and there's a lot of people waiting for that train, and based on the rules of this train station, if you pay more, you can get in the next train. And miners always want to be paid the highest amount possible, so they prefer higher fee transactions, which makes sense. If you were a miner, it'd be the same thing. This is the way fee markets work, period. So why would I mine 0 fee transactions when I can mine high fee transactions and get more money? It just makes sense economically. No fee and low fee transactions can fill up the mempool and never leave, which isn't necessarily true about the never leaving part. I don't know how abandoned, unspent transactions go in and out of the mempool. Again, that's above and beyond this video anyway. The network used to prioritize old coins so that you couldn't just move coins back and forth to spam the network. That's not the case anymore. Instead, they just decided to remove zero fee transactions. I think they will keep increasing this beyond zero fee transactions, which is probably controversial as well. I haven't heard or seen this anywhere, but it makes sense to me. If we're getting what I'll show you, a mempool full of just empty fees, you're going to have to move up something to mitigate that, or else it's just going to keep happening. So let's talk about the mempool. So what the mempool is unconfirmed transaction count. You can see it up here, unconfirmed transaction count. So when people talk about mempool, that's what they're talking about. And you can see over here, this is total number of unconfirmed transactions. So at one point it was over 200,000. It's currently around 125, 35,000 at the moment. That's what the total graph represents. And then the colors represent the fees being paid. So you can see here that the 1 to 2 fee slot doesn't take up that much space in the mempool. Neither does the 2 to 5, alone. Neither does the 5 to 10. But when you add up all of these slices, it starts to take up a significant portion of the mempool. And that's sort of what this shows here. So this is the mempool size in megabytes. So these are transactions waiting to be cleared. And you can see there's an awful lot of transactions with 1 to 2 sat per byte, which is just a way to denominate the fees. Again, if you have multiple inputs or outputs, your bytes of transactions going to go up, which is why price goes up. You're more packages on the train. So 1 to 2 sats per byte is nothing. It's like a third of a penny or less, which is fine. Some networks can handle that. But when the network's being used, like Bitcoin's being used, it's not gonna work. Your fee's not gonna, your transaction's not gonna be cleared. So the question is, are these people just who don't know any better, or are these malicious actors trying to spam the mempool, increase transaction fees for everybody? I'll let you be the judge. But you can see, what's the appropriate fee? That's the next question. Do you want your fees to be zero for your coffee on-chain transactions? I don't know the answer to that. For me personally, I don't care. I'm not going to use Bitcoin for coffee on-chain transactions. I saw that in 2013 when I tried to get merchants to adopt it. We're seeing it now. We're seeing merchants say it's too volatile. Fees are too much. In the end, I don't think merchants are going to want to adopt this unless it's through something like BitPay, which is a third-party thing. But directly, it's going to be tough unless you know what you're doing. So yeah, that's the question. What is the appropriate fee? Where do we cut off the line? Where do we say, it's your fault, XYZ people, because you're paying nothing, just taking up space? These are people in the train station, maybe just kids, kids who are paying nothing. They're just going underneath the bar on the payment rail, right? And they're just running around the station and pissing people off, and nobody can get to their train. Eventually, we're just going to ban kids from the train station, because if you can't get in your train, the whole network blows up, right? Like, the whole point is to send transactions. Let's take a look at total number of transactions, which is really tough to understand unless you know what you're talking about, because transactions, the word transactions, is different for different blockchains. It's most similar for things like Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and Bitcoin, but it's sort of a different animal entirely for things like Ethereum and Ripple. If you look at Ethereum and Ripple, those quote-unquote transactions aren't necessarily value transactions, but can be a number of things. Maybe, they're usually low-value transactions anyway. I don't know, in Ripple's case, I don't really have data to support that claim. But in Ethereum's case, the value per transaction is much lower than Bitcoin for a few reasons. But so when you're looking at transactions, I'm not denying that Ethereum is just a massive network that's handling all this stuff, because it is. I mean, it's double. The transactions are essentially double Bitcoin. But you just have to be careful when you say like transactions. Like, this one has more transactions than that one, because the blockchains are different, block times are different, block sizes are different, how everything works is different, especially between Ripple and Ethereum and something like Bitcoin. So you can see, total transactions sort of gone up and down, but lately for Bitcoin, it's been at all-time highs. Why is that the case? Because despite hitting that block size ceiling, we are using SegWit transactions, which allow for more transactions per block, more people on the train every 10 minutes. If we look at block time, I left Bitcoin Cash off of this because it's got really weird outlying stuff I'll show you on the next chart. But like I said, block time, so the train to station time wants to be 10 minutes. That's what the protocol wants. You can see it'll vacillate around that time based on hash rate. So if hash rate goes way up, block times are going to go down. If electricity on the train goes up, electricity to move that train around goes up, the time to station or time between stations will go down until the protocol decides this is too fast or this is too slow, and we're going to adjust that. So we're approaching, near not all-time lows, but relative local lows at 7 and whatever the fraction of 0.78 minutes is. So less than 8 minutes is quick for Bitcoin. Like I said, it's going to readjust to 10 minutes. So that means difficulty is going to go up. The protocol is going to adjust that. It's always going to try to get back to 10 minutes, and that's every 2016 blocks. Every 2016 trains, it's going to try to get back that 10-minute period. LTC is a little different. Like we said, it's 2.5 minutes per block, which it's pretty much been steady between 2 and 3 minutes. You can see as price and popularity of LTC goes up, hash rate's going to explode. So it actually had a below 2-minute block time for a while until that 216. I don't actually know what it is for LTC. It's probably 4 times as much, 8,064 blocks maybe. I don't actually know when their block time adjusts, block difficulty adjusts. And then for Ethereum, it's actually like 13 seconds per train. So those trains are quick. People get on, people get off. It can allow for more people per day on the train, but the question is, those transactions are slightly different than transactions I'm discussing with other things, just because their network's so different. It's sort of like taking a space shuttle. And this all changed with their latest hard fork. I'm not going to discuss that here, but it had been much higher, somewhere around 30 seconds, I think, 23 to 30 seconds. Like I said, Bitcoin Cash, their block times, this is in minutes here. It was all over the place for a little while until they fixed their difficulty adjustment algorithm, and then it's been sort of steady to 10 minutes. But again, that's just like Bitcoin, it's going to change depending on the hash rate difficulty situation. And if anything, these comparisons show you, what can be done with a protocol to change this situation. If you don't like the situation, if you don't like the train, you go to a new train station, okay? And that new train station is a different cryptocurrency. And here's just the block size again. We were hitting this ceiling. We still are, sort of. This isn't entirely accurate of Bitcoin specifically because it's average per day, I'm pretty sure. So several blocks per day are above 1 megabyte just based on SegWit usage. But you can see here, so Litecoin way below its block size limit of 1 megabyte. And Ethereum, like I said, doesn't really have a block size limit as far as I know. And then Bitcoin Cash, I'm not going to comment on, but it's super variable as far as what's in their block size, kind of based on who's waiting in the station. And theirs goes up to 8 megabytes. Yeah, I'm just not going to. And if we look at average transaction fees, we see this a lot, especially lately. I see this all over. It's used a lot for propaganda purposes, but we can see obviously that Bitcoin has increased a lot as far as average fee per transaction. This is not SegWit fee, SegWit transactions. I'd have to pull up a separate data sheet for that. It's likely that the average SegWit fee is $13, but I've paid way less than that to get in on next block even. So I don't really know who's paying all these crazy fees, but if you contrast this to Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Ethereum, those fees are obviously much lower. If fees are an issue for you, you can always use something else. Like I said, that might be sacrilege, but right now that's the best we can do. And then if we go back to this transactions thing, and if we look at Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin, they don't have transactions really compared to Bitcoin. They're fractions of what Bitcoin is, and Ethereum's transactions are a little different. So it's hard to really comment, as a whole, what this really means. But clearly Bitcoin fees are going up. That is obvious. And the last slide is just Bitcoin fees denominated in Bitcoin. And again, they've been relatively stable, somewhere around 0.001 per transaction. And if you want to get into the sixth block, which is most of the time my case, I'm not usually spending anything for anything. I do rarely, but when I do, it's not an issue. Even then, just the way that the payment processors handle the payments, essentially taking almost zero confirm transactions. But anyway, so the sixth block, I'm not like saying, oh, this is great, we can go to the sixth block and the fees go way down. I'm just saying that's what I do. I don't do high priority stuff normally, so it's whatever. But if you're sending something to an exchange or trying to sell something before whatever happens, you want that next block priority life. That's all I got for today. Dislike, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think about fees, what I botched, and happy trading.